bomb threats, blackouts, the biggest terror strike on U.S. soil. New Yorkers think they've seen it all. But there's one catastrophe that hasn't happened yet.
People are going to shake their heads and it's like, oh my God, look what happened.
Skyscraper windows turn to shrapnel.
It's like being in a war zone. Bullets going off all over the place.
The city engulfed.
Massive water that rises about 30 feet above sea level.
Millions on the shoreline, running for higher ground. If they don't,
they're going to die. It's as simple as that.
And it could all happen tomorrow if a Category 4 hurricane hits New York City. Fast-paced, in your face, and proud of it. New York City is arguably the most famous city in the world, with Times Square, the Empire State Building, and the Statue of Liberty. But few realize the Big Apple is also a prime target for a major hurricane.
The average person in New York City thinks that hurricanes happen to people that live on coasts with palm trees.
But hurricanes hit other coasts too, like the northeastern seaboard of the Atlantic Ocean. And scientific evidence puts Gotham City in the crosshairs of one of these killer hurricanes.
New York City is the third most vulnerable city in the nation.
That is, the third most vulnerable, after New Orleans and Miami, which have already been hit. But in the past, New York City has seen some close calls. In 1954, Hurricane Carol's 120-mile-per-hour wind gusts and 14-foot surge toppled trees and buildings in Rhode Island. In 1985, Gloria knocked out power in over 500,000 New England households. Now, experts say the next big hurricane may be brewing.
This is a question of when, not a question of if.
They've discovered that a Category 3 strength super hurricane strikes the New York area on average every 70 years.
And the last catastrophic one hit
68 years ago. How bad was the last megastorm? Take a look at the legendary fury of 1938's Long Island Express, the hurricane that tore New England apart. Idyllic beaches and lush farmland make Long Island a golden getaway for privileged New Yorkers. But few in their coastal homes ever imagine these serene shores turning deadly.
People really believed hurricanes did not come to New England. And children remember asking their parents if they'd hear of a typhoon or hurricane, and someone would say, "Don't worry about it, dear. They don't come to New England."
But on September 18, 1938, 1,000 miles off the Florida coast, a nightmare comes to life. A storm has gathered strength from the warm tropical waters, developing into a Category 3 hurricane.
It formed off the coast of Africa near the Cape Verde Islands, and it moved across the tropical Atlantic.
September 19th, the hurricane rages past the Bahamas with winds over 150 miles per hour. Its next projected stop, southern Florida. Residents board up their homes and brace for a devastating strike. But the night before expected landfall, the hurricane hits a
trough of low pressure
and suddenly veers north. It seems Florida has dodged a bullet.
Their forecasters predicted that the storm would do what most storms do, curve out and go out into the Atlantic and die.
Many at the Weather Bureau remain confident that the storm will never hit land, even as they lose track of the hurricane as it moves north off the East Coast.
Now remember, there were no planes, there were no satellites.
But the hurricane doesn't fade away. Instead, prevailing south to north winds, called the jet stream, lock the storm on course toward its ultimate target, New York State.
And whenever we have a situation like that, it literally funnels hurricanes into the Northeast. So it was literally channeled like a shotgun.
It was as though a red carpet had been rolled out for it. It was directed right ashore.
And worse yet, the monster storm is accelerating north at an astounding speed. 3 times faster than the average 20 miles per hour.
It was as fast as a car going on an interstate, and it was hundreds of miles wide, and it was coming.
September 21st, 8 a.m., West Hampton, Long Island. Richard Hendrickson starts his daily chores on his family's farm.
We thought we'd have another rainy day. No one knew about this hurricane.
But as Richard works in the barn, he notices the first signs of an impending storm, stronger winds.
Rather suddenly, the building began to shake a little bit, and the roof was rising.
3:30 p.m. The hurricane slams into southern Long Island.
There was no evacuation plan. People were trapped. They didn't know what to do.
Wind gusts well in excess of 100 miles per hour obliterate signposts, fences, and turn 4-pound roof shingles into deadly shrapnel.
If they had hit a person, they would have cut him about halfway through.
Then, the killer blow. It's a wall of water known as a surge, and it's 2 stories high.
It's both terrifying and almost unbelievable to look out there and see that gray-blue wall of water coming at you.
A surge is created as the howling winds around the hurricane's eye push the increasingly shallow water ashore. Now, this mountain of water comes barreling over the coast. The sudden impact is staggering.
The force of that water was measured on seismographs in Alaska.
Families are trapped in their homes and desperately scramble to get above the rising water.
People didn't know where their loved ones were. People at home didn't know if anyone was going to come home. Some can't swim and don't make it. They're never seen again.
But the hurricane hasn't finished. About 100 miles northeast of Long Island's landfall, downtown Providence, Rhode Island, is submerged under nearly 20 feet of ocean water during rush hour.
It was a terrible situation. You had people drowning in the streets. They were hanging on to marquees.
In 6 hours, the storm leaves a trail of death and destruction from Long Island, 400 miles north to Canada.
It resulted in 600 fatalities, millions of dollars of damage.
The same country clubs where just weeks before at Labor Day there had been wonderful end-of-summer dances became the places where they took the bodies, and they became the morgues.
The Great Hurricane of 1938 remains the worst recorded hurricane in New England, and it missed the millions of New York City residents by just 75 miles. Next time, New York might not be so lucky. In the event of a powerful hurricane, one major factor will seal New York City's fate: its location.
New York City is a coastal town. We have 478 miles of a shorefront in this city.
In fact, Manhattan is surrounded by water on all sides. The Hudson River, the East River, and New York Bay. That means if a hurricane approaches from the south, the very shape of the bay, a right angle formed by New York and the New Jersey shoreline, will magnify the surge to catastrophic heights.
When you have a right angle on the shoreline and a hurricane comes in, it pushes all the waters into the right angle.
And when the water arrives, it will come rushing toward 8.2 million New Yorkers. 2 million of them living
directly in its path.
We have the largest concentration of people and structures on any hurricane-prone coastline in America.
If a hurricane hits in that dense population, it's going to be terrible.
Another huge impact
will be when hurricane winds meet New York City's world-famous skyline.
When you squeeze wind in between narrow structures, you get an effect that makes the wind go faster.
Like water shooting through a compressed garden hose, winds will increase to over 130 miles per hour as they pass between the upper levels of crowded skyscrapers, sending a deluge of broken glass onto the streets below.
I am God-fearing what 130-mile-an-hour winds is going to do to New York City.
The scenario for us is pretty bleak.
Up next, the Big Apple goes under.
You're not talking about pumping out the subways, you're talking about rebuilding them.
When It Could Happen Tomorrow continues. during its life, a Category 4 hurricane can unleash more energy than 10,000 nuclear bombs. And the next one that targets the East Coast could hit New York City. This Category 4 hurricane's approach to New York will be deceptively quick and deadly.
The sky will be very clear.
Many times before the hurricane hits, it's bright sunshine.
In the last days of August, near the height of hurricane season, many New Yorkers are out enjoying the beach. But 260 miles north of Puerto Rico, a menacing hurricane is gathering strength. Emergency officials in New York City track the storm as it moves around the edge of a circulating high-pressure system. They hope it will curve back out to sea, but the data tells them the monster could hit New York in less than 72 hours. Emergency managers bite the bullet and issue voluntary evacuation warnings to those at risk on the shorelines throughout New York's 5 boroughs, a mix of urban high-rises and suburban tracts of housing.
This is going to be an extremely difficult operation. If the public waits until the last moment, there will be some people who may be stranded.
But it's a lazy summer weekend, and most people aren't about to change their plans.
They're not going to be thrilled for you to say, hey, guess what? We're taking these next couple of days away from you.
But even as New Yorkers soak up the sun, the hurricane hurtles northward, propelled by the jet stream. For the Big Apple, time is almost up. Commuters return to work on Monday under cloudy skies, while city officials still struggle to clear out hospitals in flood zones. But it's too late. The storm speeds faster than expected towards its target, as only a northern hurricane can.
We don't have the leisure of Florida, of watching it come for a week across the Atlantic.
The storm is now traveling at a frightening clip, accelerating to over 60 miles per hour, which will put it on New York's doorstep in just a few short hours. By mid-morning, the outer edges of this Goliath start whipping up winds in New York.
We'll start to see winds increase probably above tropical storm force, and that's 39 miles an hour or so.
Transportation officials have no choice but to shut down some of the primary exits from the city, its suspension bridges.
Bridges traditionally have been closed when gale force winds approach, which would mean that the city would sort of close down.
More than 1 million evacuees, as well as commuters, get trapped in gridlock as they try to make their way out of Manhattan, Staten Island, Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx.
People will self-evacuate. They'll take their own cars when they're told not to. Roads will become deeply congested.
Late afternoon, the Category 4 hurricane makes landfall in northern New Jersey, which borders New York City to the west. That means the storm's most powerful and violent winds roar directly on top of Manhattan's iconic skyline, which accelerates these winds to even higher speeds.
We'd see winds of over 130 miles an hour with gusts of probably close to 150.
Times Square is transformed into a war zone. Anything not bolted down turns into shrapnel.
Anything that's not tied down is going to be airborne.
And in a high wind, the most innocuous object can be deadly.
The raging winds attack the Empire State Building.
The high wind velocities create vacuums and pop windows out.
Shattered windows pierce the air like daggers.
Hopefully no one's on the street. If they are, it won't be just glass falling down on them. It'll be glass being blown through the city like razor blades.
But the winds are only the first taste of the hurricane's fury. Now, the vortex invades New York Bay, pushing along a 3-story high wall of water. The massive surge.
You start to see a large rise of this water, and it will come in and envelop the whole area.
The unrelenting surge bears down on its first target, Coney Island.
And you won't be able to see much of anything. The parachute jump, the Ferris wheel, and maybe the famous cyclone. It will be largely underwater.
A flood of almost biblical proportions inundates America's playground, wiping out its storied past As the surge races further north, it also moves the confluence of the East and Hudson rivers up and over Lower Manhattan.
We could see flooding almost up to 14th Street in many sections of the southern part of Manhattan.
Tunnels and subways turn into underground rivers.
When you have a hurricane, you get salt water. You're not talking about pumping out the subways, you're talking about rebuilding.
And above ground,
Many of the familiar parts of New York, such as Lily, Chinatown, and Wall Street, will literally be underwater.
This could easily surpass Katrina as the largest disaster that this country has ever seen, both in life and property.
in 2 hours, it's over. The surge recedes from the city. What lies in its wake is unthinkable. 22 million tons of debris, thousands dead and missing, millions homeless.
Once you've done the body count and the human cost, you got to look at the economic consequences.
Power outages are widespread as New York spirals into darkness, anarchy, and ruin. The financial capital of the world is crippled.
No one knows how long it'll take to rebuild New York City. You're talking weeks, months, years, at a cost that is staggering, staggering.
How will you survive New York's Category 4 hurricane?
This evacuation will be one of the toughest undertakings that this city has ever gone under.
Our vulnerability is real. We need a plan that deals with that uncertainty. We don't have one.
When It Could Happen Tomorrow returns. Avoiding a natural disaster is impossible, and 8 million people live in New York City and its 5 boroughs. It's a huge challenge for emergency planning.
When and if a hurricane hits, everyone's going to be in motion. The question is, can you move them? Where do you move them to? How do you move them? Do they know where to go? They don't, they won't, they can't.
One answer, don't evacuate the entire city.
The concept is to have limited evacuation.
Instead, the focus is on evacuating those most in danger, residents living in the path of the hurricane's deadly storm surge.
We know that water kills in that force and that intensity. So our primary concern in regards to evacuation is removing as much of the population out of those potentially impacted areas to higher ground where storm surge is not an issue.
Still, that means moving 2.2 million of the most vulnerable residents. And all these people must get to higher ground, as much as 6 miles away from some flood zones.
It's never been tried, it can't be tried, but it's on a scale that will dwarf anything that's ever been seen.
It will be the biggest evacuation attempt in U.S. history, and they've got less than 72 hours to make it happen.
This evacuation will be one of the toughest undertakings that this city has ever gone under.
In safer areas, the city's public schools will be turned into shelters. But those buildings can only hold a fraction of the evacuees.
They have about 700 or 800 schools. Each houses about 1,000 people, maybe, best case, 800,000 people.
That leaves almost 1.5 million people fending for themselves.
We believe that the majority of them are going to go with friends and family.
They don't have enough shelter. They've been underestimated.
Even directing people to the nearest shelter is a daunting task in a city where not everybody speaks English.
The challenge for us now is to try and gear our public education towards as many languages as possible.
Currently, information is available in less than 10 out of 180 languages spoken in New York. It's one of the many challenges emergency officials are working to overcome.
The focus on terrorist evacuations has left them really way behind the curve on weather-related evacuations. The city is simply not prepared.
It's a race against time.
Timing is never on the emergency manager's side, especially not in the Northeast U.S. For every mile that the storm increases, that window of opportunity for evacuation shrinks.
And when the hurricane warnings are broadcast, officials can only hope that everyone listens.
If they don't listen, it's not going to work.
It is a life and death situation, and people need to heed the evacuation order when it is given.
But what do New Yorkers really fear? Find out when It Could Happen Tomorrow continues. For New York, every hurricane season is a gamble with millions of lives at stake. Unfortunately, most residents don't take the danger seriously.
I know Long Island and New Jersey sometimes have some weather like that, but here, you know, everything's built pretty well. I think we'll be pretty safe.
There is a portion of the population that does not believe that a hurricane can hit, regardless of them living 10, 20 feet off of the ocean.
For many, in the wake of 9/11, another type of threat is also real.
I'm more worried that terrorists will attack than a hurricane.
And other priorities more urgent.
As long as the economy goes good, we're pretty good.
Officials know that this attitude's got to change if people want to survive.
That is my biggest fear, that that's what's going to kill people.
If people don't take responsibility for themselves, they're going to get injured. They're going to die.
Because a hurricane is due to demolish New York City. And it could happen tomorrow.